3 years ago, I faced a major challenge as a teacher. The pandemic had forced our school online, and my ninth grade students that were typically active, engaged, and collaborative in lessons were suddenly passive and disengaged online. I would send them into breakout rooms to collaborate on learning activities, and when I entered those breakout rooms, I was met by awkward silence. It was like my students had forgot how to connect with other human beings. I realized I needed to do something as a teacher to help them connect again. And over the course of the next several weeks, I tried many things. One of the things that I tried was what we called compliments. Basically, I would start every lesson by giving a compliment to student A would give a compliment to student B, and so on. I know what you're thinking, it sounds pretty cheesy, and my students thought so too. And to be honest, it didn't go very well at first. A lot of the compliments my students gave each other were pretty superficial, but for some reason I thought I was onto something. So I persevered through the initial failures and also the occasional eye roll I would receive from students. Over the course of the next several weeks, something happened. Every time we did the activity, the compliments became more and more genuine until eventually a majority of them were actually deeply touching. And when I went back into the breakout rooms that my students were in, collaborating on learning activities, I noticed that the dynamic, active environment that existed in school was back online. And equally important, my students seemed happy. This experience showed me the power that social connection has on teenagers and how teachers, when we are strategic, can intentionally create experiences that help students connect with one another. Fortunately for all of us, the pandemic is over, but we are on the verge of a much greater shift in education, and one that is going to put our students increasingly in front of their devices again. And I'm talking about the AI revolution. Bill Gates recently predicted that only 3 jobs would survive the AI revolution, and teaching wasn't one of them. And although I disagree with Mr. Gates, I do believe that my profession is going to change dramatically over the next 10 years as AI becomes better and better at personalizing learning for students. A lot of experts believe that great teachers of the future will be able to do 2 things very well. First, provide social, emotional learning and support to students. And second, utilize AI to personalize and maximize learning for students. I agree that this is the direction that education is going, and to contribute to this conversation today, I want to focus on an area of social emotional learning that is often overlooked, especially in our high school, and it's the ability to maintain and develop authentic, deep, and meaningful relationships with others, specifically our peers. I think great teachers in the future are going to help students to build this skill and be what I call friendship facilitators. Skeptical? Let me try to persuade you. First, we know a lot about social connection. We know that social connection improves well-being and learning. In fact, the 70-year Harvard study on adult development highlighted that the greatest predictor of long-term health and happiness was the quality of one's relationships. We also know that social connection increases resilience and decreases anxiety. Moreover, students that feel a sense of belonging and connection with their peers in their learning community are more engaged and motivated in learning and ultimately learn more. And I know what some of you might be thinking. You might be saying, Brian, that's great and all, but relationships just kind of form organically. Teachers do not need to intentionally do anything to support students. And in some ways, that's true. Just like a student can become creative without ever taking an art class, or a student can learn critical thinking skills without ever participating in a debate, a student can develop great friendships without a teacher ever intentionally creating experiences for them. But those experiences help and also lead to the likelihood that they happen. The issue is that we're facing a modern problem that a lot of people don't know about. And it's that social connection is on a steep decline. In fact, since 2010, the amount of time that people spend with their friends has decreased almost every year. And today, teenagers spend less than half of the amount of time with their friends as their parents' generation did. And this is having a massive impact on Gen Z. The amount of students that claim that they have no close friendships has quadrupled in the last generation. And a recent study of young Gen Z adult men showed that 28% had no close friendships. 28%. It is no wonder that Gen Z is statistically the loneliest and most anxious generation. On the flip side, however, teenagers that are able to develop strong friendships are more likely to be successful in their careers. They're more likely to find themselves in happy, healthy marriages in the future, and they're more likely to become empathetic parents. I don't think the question is whether or not we should prioritize social connection in our school. If our job as educators is to help students build the skills to lead successful, fulfilled lives, how can we afford not to? Now, what I'm looking at right now is 400 nodding heads with me. Although, actually, to be honest, the light is in my eye and I can't actually see much at all. But I'm picturing in my mind right now 400 people completely on board with what I'm saying. But especially if you're a teacher in the room, you're probably wondering, Brian, I'm all on board. I want to be a friendship facilitator, but my teacher training didn't really cover that. How in the world can I become a friendship facilitator? Well, that's the easy part. All you have to do is follow these 3 steps. I'm joking, it's not easy at all, actually. The thing is, teaching is already really, really, really hard, and human relationships are very complicated and nuanced. And you know what's even more complicated and nuanced? Teenage relationships. But there are some things that teachers can do. So it starts with teachers creating an environment and social interactions that make it more likely that social connection occurs. Lots of psychological and educational research indicates that certain types of social connection lead to more interpersonal closeness. For example, teachers just grouping students together into groups to participate in a challenging but novel activity increase the likelihood that social bonds occur. Moreover, just certain types of conversations, like those that reflect on our values, the things that we're proud of, and the challenges that we face, are more likely to build connection between students and adults. What I try to do is combine these approaches within project-based learning. For example, this year, a group of my students were studying global issues. I put them in groups to do a project in which they researched a global issue and addressed it at a local or school-wide level, a challenging and novel activity. At the beginning of the project, I gave them opportunities to get to know each other, their strengths, their weaknesses, their fears. And then throughout the course of the project, there were reflection points that they would do together in which they could talk about their successes and challenges that they were facing as a team. The academic aims of this project were to help students build skills in research, analysis, collaboration, and metacognition. And I'm confident that all of my students made progress in that area. But there was an added benefit of this project. I'm also confident that all of my students left this project with a better social connection to their group than they had before it started. Did they leave it best friends? Of course not, because friendship is something that takes years to develop. But if students are doing this in all of their classes, throughout all of their years of education, they are more likely to create social bonds. The thing is, as teachers, there are so many different things that we can try, but unfortunately, this talk is only 12 minutes long. One fear I have is that teachers will come to me a week or 2 from now and say, Brian, I was inspired by your talk and I tried it, but my students just weren't that interested. They just wanted to get on with normal learning. As teachers, we're just gonna have to try a little bit harder. We're going to have to get out of our comfort zone, and we're going to have to role model risk-taking. We're going to have to persevere through the initial failures and the occasional eye rolls we get from students, because ultimately, our students need us to. 3 years ago, I surveyed my students to get feedback on my teaching. One of the questions I asked was, What is something that we do in class that supports your learning that you wish we did more of? The most common answer was not more project-based learning or more individualized feedback. The most common answer that my students gave me was compliments. Not only did they enjoy the learning experience, many of them were craving it. To be honest, part of me envisions a sad future, a future in which AI does increase the efficiency of learning, but a future in which the adults in students' lives, both their parents and their teachers, double down on this fact and put our students more and more in front of their AI tutors and less in front of their peers, always striving for that next short-term goal, like a good score on the next assessment, and failing to acknowledge what students really need. If we go down that path as educators, we will have been complicit in raising a generation of young adults who are more unhappy and more anxious and less capable of navigating the social and emotional complexities of adulthood. But it doesn't have to be that way. There's another possible path. A future in which the efficiency brought on by AI frees up time. Time for teachers to finally focus on what truly matters most for our students: human connection. Thank you.